Hello and welcome. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. We're live, finally. For everybody joining us in the US, welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge. An hour late. I do apologize. I royally fucked up on the time zones and time change that happened in the US a bit earlier than in Europe this time. Yeah, I guess there you go. That's the tricky mathematics of time zone changes between Europe and the US. Never mind, we're here, we're live. For all of you joining us via Zoom, welcome, dear friends, dear family. As always, it's good to see everybody. For those of you joining us over on the Facebook live stream, thanks for taking time out of your precious day to join us for another inspiring conversation this week with the one and only Nick Libretti from JR Cigars, joining us live from a beautiful setup that we're kind of used to from the podcast and the shows that you do, Nick. I'm very happy to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to be here. Good to share a chat. Good to share a cigar. And welcome to the Light 'em Up Lounge.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. It's a truly an honor. I'm usually in your shoes doing the interviewing, so to be asked sometimes it's very like a kind of an out of body experience. Like what do they want to know about me? I'm not that important. But I really do appreciate it. I'm sure no one in Europe knows who I am. There can't be that many people in Europe who know who the hell I am. But I appreciate the chance and looking very much to hanging out with you guys today.
Well, first of all, I don't think that's necessarily true because I'm sure plenty of people, especially the nerdy ones, the people who join a program like Light 'em Up, they try to go deep, do their research, and watch different programs and different shows. So I'm pretty sure you're a familiar face to quite many of them. But it's a good point. Why don't you give us like the 2-minute short introduction to who is Nick Libretti and what's your gig with JR Cigars, and then we'll kind of dissect things a little more,
Sure.
dive a little deeper. But give us the quick intro.
Sure. So, Nick Libretti, as you said, I am the brand manager for JR Cigar. So my current day-to-day duties, I mean, anyone who does know me knows that I do all of our YouTube content along with Secret Chris Arangio, who's our videographer. So we do our podcast, the Long Ash podcast, which comes out every Friday. We do top 5 videos, reviews, different sketches and whatever. But my main day-to-day job now is kind of handling some of the bigger private projects for JR. Our 50th anniversary campaign that we had 2 years ago. Recently just launched our brand new Cigar of the Month program, working with, amazing manufacturers and going to some events, FaceTiming with the customers. So anything that's the perfect job at a corporate level for a cigar smoker. I'll put it that way. I get to do all of the fun stuff.
That's a good way of putting it. Well, there's plenty to talk about with all the little points that you mentioned. But first of all, why don't you explain a little bit as to how did you get into cigars and the whole art and lifestyle and the culture in the first place?
Well, it's funny enough, my dad, second generation Italian American, was a big cigar smoker in the 90s. And I've always lived in the same area in North Jersey. And so when I was a kid, he actually used to come into the very store that I started working at. I wasn't allowed in the cigar part. They used to have back in the 90s, they had like a little kids toy section, like a little men's shop that kids could hang out at. My dad would go and buy his cigars. I passed by this place on my way to school every day. And then when I was 20, I was home for the summer and I needed a job. And I always loved the aroma. I loved, the how can I put it? The culture kind of around cigar smoking, particularly at that time. It was wise men, learned men would smoke their cigars and talk with brandy and talk of heavy things were discussed. And there was nothing heavy about me at the time except for my weight. So I wanted to contribute a little bit and get involved in this community. So I started working in the Whippany store when I was 20 years old, just part-time. And within a month, I was in it. I was into the culture. I was into reading the magazines, Cigar Journal, Cigar Aficionado. I was on the websites. I was on social media. And it got to a point that within a year or so, some of the old timers who were working in the store would go to me like, "Hey, we got this new thing in. Do you know anything about it?" And I would explain, "Oh, it's made by this guy. It's made by Pete Johnson. It's coming from here. It's coming from there." And it just kind of took off from there. And then 2014, they were restructuring our corporate office, and they were like, "Hey, we're kind of looking for someone to do social media. You know a lot. You're have a pretty good presence." I was running a lot of events, and so they brought me over to do that, and just been growing ever since.
Fascinating story, and I think a lot of people will share those sentiments of how you just happen to kind of stumble across cigars at some point in your life, and then it sucks you all in, and
It does.
and it never lets you out again. There's something truly fascinating and mystical about this world, about this humble product, a handcrafted product that brings people together from all walks of life in a very particular and very special way.
Yeah, there's nothing really like it. I mean, particularly with tobacco, but really, I guess you could say the craft beer community is similar and they've kind of had a similar trajectory, but you don't have the one-on-one connection with the manufacturers in that, you don't get to, you can go to the facility in Kentucky where they make the bourbon, but you miss out on the history, the heritage that you can find in the cigar industry. And also the camaraderie that, we're all over the world right now at 3:00 on a Wednesday. And we all share something special. And I don't know, it's very unique in that way.
Absolutely. What about those early days in retail though? Now, coming from the enthusiasts and aficionados perspective, then slowly and steadily getting into it a bit more behind the scenes, whereas now you're kind of full into it, and it's your life's path and your vocation, I would almost say. But those early days in retail, how has that changed your perspective on the industry and provided you with a different perspective on things, and just from moving from an aficionado to kind of being in there?
Well, I mean, the industry has changed so much just in that time, the past, 13, 14 years. It definitely gave me an appreciation, and it gave me an insight to, I think, certain trends or certain manufacturers that maybe are just kind of coming into their own. For example, Plasencia came out with the Alma Fuerte only a couple of years ago. And before that, many of your average cigar smokers may never have heard of them. I knew a Plasencia from my first month working in the store. They were responsible for some great blends. They worked with Rocky. They worked with Alec Bradley. They had some of their own lines. They were growers. They were rollers. They were everything. And so when the Alma Fuerte was kind of first being teased, and we had Nestor Jr. in here for an interview, I was like really excited about it. And then there was a lot of people like, "Who's this guy? Plasencia? What do they do?" So it gave me a lot of insight into that end of the business. Naxa being another one. The Naxa factory in Nicaragua that's kind of seen this resurgence with Steve Saka and now with Crown Heads. I was smoking a lot of Naxa cigars back in the 2010s. So it gave me an appreciation for some of the manufacturing ends, but also for the trajectory, for how the industry has changed. I go back now and cigars that were my absolute favorite, and I try to compare them to something now, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't even come close. And then there's other ones that I didn't like back then because maybe my palate wasn't advanced enough, or it was too complex of a blend, or just something that wasn't right with me back then, that now I smoke and they become some of my favorites. So always going back to the beginning, you're going to find something. You're going to find something you can learn from, something you can appreciate, whether it's good or bad. And there's definitely been a lot of that. So,
And I guess not just for your personal journey and the evolution of your own cigar path, but also the way you address things towards a treasured customer or guest who walks through the doors. It's a completely different environment, and my background is in hospitality,
right.
So I think you start to think differently when you have that mindset and that openness of hosting people, welcoming people, and we're humble servants. Whether you're a bartender or a waiter in a restaurant, or even when you work the retail floor in a cigar shop, right? You are there to service the people and not necessarily to just recommend things that you like.
Right.
It's a different mindset, and I always felt it does something with our own perception, appreciation, and the way we go about that whole lifestyle. Did you experience a similar thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, when you get into anything, kind of on your own, when you become a fan of it, you're always going to kind of have your own biases, your own preferences. But so I would only smoke, Party is Black was like my big one, or Fuente. But then I would see people come in and just buying boxes of, let's say, the Hoyo Excalibur, which even when I was younger, I thought, oh, that's like an old man's brand. That's nothing, like that's not cool, that's not hip. But people were buying them boxes and boxes and boxes. I would try to sometimes be like, "Oh, you sure you want that?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then eventually I started to smoke it, and I started to understand the customer's perspective way more. I started to understand, well, listen, is it the most complex thing? No. I'm like, but it's consistent, it's affordable, it's got a recognizable name. And so on occasion, the customer would actually teach me a thing or two, which opened my eyes. One thing that I never did is, they would always have a lot of times like some kind of spiff item, or like, hey, for every time you sell this, you get an extra dollar or whatever. I hardly ever did those, because at the end of the day, there were people that somebody would come in like, oh, I need something very, very mellow and smooth. It's for my dad, and he doesn't like anything too strong. And if Partagas Black was on the spiff list that month, that's what they were moving. And I'm like, no, it's not what they want though. And hardly are they ever going to come back and complain. They're just not going to come back. And that's never what you want. When you're in the hospitality business, when you're in retail, is you want them to come back. So I always did my best to listen to the customer. And even if they weren't a serious cigar smoker, so I couldn't throw out like, oh, do you want like a Colorado wrapper or Rosado? I couldn't throw out any of these terms. Just bring it down to a base level and listen to them and see what are they saying to you. When they say mild, do they mean mild in strength, mild in flavor? And you do your best to give them the options. You do your best in terms of the overall service. And then they'll come back. And I had a lot of regulars who came back and would ask for me. So I guess it worked.
And in that sense, I also think that every retail shop is different according to the location that you're at, the clientele that you're catering towards. There's different experience levels of the people who walk in, all the way from a complete novice to a well-seasoned veteran, and you have to deal with all these varying circumstances and all these elements, right? How in retrospect, how do you look at the retail landscape when you compare it to those early days when you started out and where we are today?
I would say the consumer, at least the regular consumer, is much more well-informed today. Back in, we'll call it 2009, 2010, in terms of, there was a few guys like me. There was, the cigar community, the Reddit pages, the forums had started to really pick up. But in terms of my daily interactions, there wasn't a lot of what we call the cigar nerd. The experienced smokers that I would interact with were just older, mostly gentlemen. And they didn't know a lot about the product or a lot about different brands. Even my dad, who I thought, growing up was like, oh, big time cigar guy. He knew everything. He only knew a couple brands, and he didn't really know what was in them. He kind of knew, oh, this is, I think, Dominican or whatever. So the level of knowledge was not there, and they didn't need it to be. Like they were enjoying it. This is not a denigration on them. That's how that generation, and still to this day, that generation, they like no thrills, no fuss, no muss. I want a good cigar at a good price. I don't care what it says on the box. And hats off to them. That's how most of us should be. But trying to hook somebody on a new cigar was tough. trying to get somebody on like, hey, this new brand Crown Heads has been around, we want to you always had to hook them in with some kind of relation to a brand that they might already know. Oh, it's the guy who used to do Monte Cristo, or they used to be at CAO, or they used to do. So for any kind of new brands, forget about limited editions. It was actually a hard sell. Nowadays, you look at any retail store, I'm not sure how it is in Europe, but in the US, the core lines, these kind of heritage products, that had been the bulwark of the industry for so long, they're the slow movers. It's the new stuff. It's the warped. It's the tatuaje. It's the crown heads. It's the foundation, the Dunbartons. These are the ones they can't keep on the shelves anymore because customers know what they want. They know the hottest thing. They're checking out the ratings and the reviews and the YouTube channels and the podcasts, and they're almost exclusively going for that stuff. So it's shifted very much. The pendulum has swung the other way, which is interesting. I like to have a little bit of a balance in the middle, but I will say it's definitely shifted into, I don't want to say an over knowledgement, but there's almost too much knowledge out there now.
I have a slight feeling that the answer to my next question is probably the typical all of it, but where do you attribute that change in the perception towards? Would you say it's because of the offering that the industry and all the players within have brought to the table? Is it the media landscape that brought awareness and gave more readily available information to everybody out there willing to listen? Is it the consumer who has changed, or are all of these kind of natural consequences of each other?
Oh, it's definitely an all of the above scenario. I mean, when you look at, let's look at, the kind of the limited edition aspect of it and the marketing behind that for certain brands. I mean, that started really kind of as we know it in the early 90s with Fuente and the Opus X. To this day, they have done that brand perfectly, because usually what a company does, they introduce a limited edition, everyone goes crazy for it, it sells out. Well, they see that they're leaving money on the table. It's like, oh, let's just make 10,000 of these, release it as a regular production. Fuente never did that. Opus is still the gold standard of how you release something limited to market. And a lot of people have done that since, because this kind of also ties into the media landscape, as you were saying. Instagram, Facebook, new, trendy. These are the buzzwords people are looking for. It used to be everyone wanted to fit in. Now no one wants to fit in. Everyone wants to get the newest, unique thing. The lower the amount that they made, the higher the value people put on it. And I understand it. I mean, I definitely understand it. When any company announces like, oh, we're doing this new limited run thing, I get very excited. However, I don't like what it does to the industry as a whole, because you lose a lot of what's the word I'm looking? Consistency.
Yeah.
I want, sometimes you want the McDonald's model. And what I mean by that is sometimes you want to pick up a cigar 15 years later, the same cigar, and it tastes the same and it brings back those same memories, just like McDonald's. If you get McDonald's in Austria, if you get McDonald's in Texas, it's going to, the Big Mac's the Big Mac. It's going to taste the exact same. A lot of times I want that in certain cigars. Now, obviously some manufacturers are still doing that, but this model of gotta be new every year, trade show, 5 new things, and they don't want to be doing that. I've talked to a lot of these manufacturers. You work for a cigar brand as well. This is not what they want to be doing. I actually think that Michael Herklotz from Ferdi Otego has a great outlook on it, where he's like, maybe every few years we release something new. Like, otherwise we're working on our brands, man. People like our brands. We're going to keep making sure that they're consistent, having the right tobacco, having the right sales force in order to get these products across. And then every couple of years we'll add something new, which used to be the norm. That's what it used to be. Every few years you would add something new to your portfolio. Now, not only is it every year, it's every year and several new lines. It could be a new size. It could be a new wrapper. It could be an entirely new limited edition line altogether. So what it does for the marketing aspect and the creation of the hype, I think definitely takes away from what the essence of what it should be. So that's kind of how I feel of how it's progressed and why.
I'm completely with you on that. And also in particular on the aspect of at some point you feel like everybody's just trying to rush and get another
Mhm.
thing, and what's new, what's the next big thing, and you fall into that trap or into that hamster wheel where you constantly have to reinvent yourself, whereas ever so often it would be great to focus on what's good, and what are the cigars, the blends, the products
Mm.
that have stood the test of time, and have truly established themselves as a legacy brand or a legacy cigar that
Mm.
people will enjoy throughout the decades. And I'm honestly, personally, I'm curious. I mean, I'm 34 years old now, so I haven't been in the industry for that long, and many of the veterans that we also have on the show here, like George Brightman, they've seen it all in comparison, and they can
Right.
probably talk about it differently. But for you and I, it's curious to see. Is it all just going in trends and ups and downs and certain waves, and then for a certain period of time, and be it a decade, everybody's what's new, and then you go back and realize, well, been there, done that. You start to go back to the good stuff, or the, not that the other's not good, but the true and tested, and the more legacy kind of products that have
Exactly.
always been there. So it's a bit of a balancing act, right? And certain, it's like in fashion, everything comes and goes, and if you just kept your stuff from the 60s, you'd kill it today.
Exactly. Exactly. Listen, everyone at some point they're going to want to run out and get the crazy $500 bottle of Glenlivet, and like, oh, I got to find, oh, it's made in a cask from an old ship or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's only so much sustainability in that. At the end of the day, people are going to go and buy a bottle of Glenlivet 12. Like, they're going to look for that reliable um product. Now, what I can say is some of these companies do use kind of these limited runs and this kind of style as a tool to bring people to their core line. So, hey, flashy new thing, get some eyes on it, and then bring them into their core line product. Which, listen, I don't blame the manufacturers for any of this. I really don't. It's the consumers, it's retailers. I mean, we do a lot of this stuff. For us, it's that's how we stay ahead. Is we have
Mhm.
something here from Steve Saka that no one else has. It's one of our few tools, that and providing a great customer experience. So it's not the manufacturer's fault, but I think at the end of the day, they're in line with us. They want to see the reliability, something solid. So even if they have to use these, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but these tools to bring people into their fold and see like, hey, these are my core line products. This is the legacy that I'm building. It's not the worst way. And I think a lot of companies are doing that. But I also think there's a lot of companies who rely way too much on the flash in the pan, get a few headlines, get a few Instagram pics. And at the end of the day, there's no substance there.
And the proof is always in the eating of the pudding anyways, right?
Yes.
And I always like that quote, or the idea of marketing won't make your product better or worse, it just exposes it more.
Yeah.
And that way you will always find the truth in what's behind all the nice gimmicky stories, and the flashy headlines, and an Instagram feed.
Exactly. I mean, I've been working with my bosses now. Like, they trust me on the limited edition stuff very much. We had a big success with our 50th anniversary lines that we did, but I've told them for a while now, and I think they're finally letting me do it. I'm like, the golden goose here is not a limited edition thing. The golden goose for me is, let me build out a brand. Let me build
Mhm.
out a JR brand that's reliable, long lasting. Yeah, we can have new versions of it later, but to build a solid in-house brand with several different sizes, and it still looks great, it's still an upscale product, but something that is reliable. That's what we all want here. Is we Marketing is great, but reliability is key.
let's use that as a bit of a segue, and talk about your transition from the storefront, working the retail floor, to when you get more heavily involved with the media side of things, because both those dynamics, as we just discussed, are very important parts of the equation, sometimes pulling apart a little bit, strengthening and fostering each other at the same time. How was that transition for you? And I mean, you started early with the whole social media game, and you've been at the forefront of building platforms, a very open and strong communication in the cigar industry. Where still marketing sometimes feels a bit rustic and old fashioned, and not really like in some other industries where they're way faster in adapting to certain trends and new things.
Well, it was actually an easier transition than you would think. You know, I got to know some manufacturers face to face from working in our Whippany store here. I was doing a lot of the events. I was one of the keyhold managers, along with my friend Anthony, who came over with me and now works on our website. He does a great job over there. And Felix, who was he's kind of like the face of the JR Whippany store for anyone who's ever been to JR in Whippany, New Jersey. So I got to FaceTime with a lot of manufacturers. I remember meeting Christian Aroa, Matt Booth without a beard. That was when I first met him. And so I had a little bit of interaction with them. And then it was me and Anthony who decided, kind of on our own, we went to, because the CEO for the entire company was based in our building, but because we have a store attached to our corporate headquarters, but they weren't really involved with us. Like, we had our manager of the store, district manager, it was a total corporate ladder. But we went to somebody, they just had a change in leadership. They had a brand new CEO who was very hands-on in a good way. His name was Rob Norris. He used to work for Altadis as well, who came out into the store and was asking questions. And I was just, I was answering them. And he's like, oh, like, what brands are hot? What is this? What is that? And I'm like, oh, it's this, and this. And then we kind of pitched him. I'm like, hey, this is 2013 now. Like, hey, this social media thing seems to be kind of important. And I think we had an Instagram page with like a couple hundred followers. The pictures weren't great. We had a couple of YouTube videos in front of a bad green screen. And so we kind of pitched him on this idea, like, hey, we should be really pushing out content. This is how information is absorbed. This is how marketing is kind of done now. And so he gave us a shot. We did some test videos. They flew us out to the first ever Kentucky barn smoker for Drew Estate. And so my first actual, like, in the field interview, I guess you could say, was with Jonathan Drew in the middle of a farm. And then they really liked that. And then they're like, all right, we're going to bring you over. Anthony's going to be your videographer, which he was for many years. And then you're going to handle all the social media platforms. And I mean, obviously it was, you had to look around, you had to see what was popular, in terms of style. I mean, my interview style has changed considerably from those early days. But it was just a matter of, if I was just honest to the customer, that's what mattered the most to me. Mm-hmm. I handled my videos the same way I would talk to a consumer. Now, being a big retailer, I can never say a cigar is bad. And I actually don't believe that any cigar is bad. I just believe it's not right for me. Every cigar has its consumer. So I would never got on here and trashed any brand. And, but I was honest. I would say, this one is I would really kind of put the emphasis on, like, this is what I really like. Or if you're looking for something budget or value, this is great for you. But I was honest with the consumer, as honest as one can be. And I think that resonated. I'm, North Jersey, kind of a BS artist. I try to stay loose with it. I try to have a little fun with it. And up to that point, I don't think there was really anyone doing it like that. I mean, you had Coop and Dojo started around the same time. But before that, in terms of like a fun interview show or fun reviews, YouTube was kind of like the Wild West. It was a lot of weird stuff going on. We did a lot of weird stuff we would not at all do today, but we communicated. That was the key. We talked with our consumers. We would ask them at the end of each video, hey, what cigars do you want to see in our next thing? I was on Half Wheel every single day for hours and hours and hours, looking at trends, looking at reviews, seeing Okay, well, who are they announcing has a new line? Why does that matter? I would go to obviously Aficionado, Cigar Journal. I would go on Instagram. I would see who has the most followers and why. Which picture on Drew Estate's Instagram page gets the most likes and why does it? And you would see that, Liga Privada number 9, significantly more than, Nica Rustica. And you kind of make an algorithm in your head over, many, many years so what the customer is going to like. So it comes to a point now where I can see an article on Half Wheel about a new cigar release, and before I even smoke it, I'm not going to say if it's a good cigar or not, but I can tell that's going to be a hit or that's not going to go anywhere. And it's a lot of time and a lot of research and kind of just feeling the vibe of what's going on out there.
Do you feel like the company was always supportive of everything that you were doing? Was it always like carte blanche and you go out there, communicate as long as you get content out? Because at the end of the day, JR Cigars is one of the biggest operators in the United States when it comes to cigar retail, it's probably for us running a show, running a program, that's one thing, but then putting it into a greater something and into this whole ecosystem is a different thing, especially when big corporations get involved. It's a different ball game.
Yeah, so there was always enough people supportive of it. I'll put it that way. There was always somebody high up, whether it be the CEO that I started under, my boss Christine at the time. There was always somebody with juice at the top who cared. But there was a while where we were, they were just like, yeah, let the guys go have fun. They get us some Instagram likes or whatever. Our most recent kind of regime, if you will, with our current CEO Davide, and how things are kind of being run with Tabacalera USA now as a whole. Not only do we have a lot of freedom, but they listen to the content team. They advise, they ask for our advice on stuff because we have our ear to the ground just more than anybody else. I mean, we get the face-to-face with the manufacturers and not quick phone calls, just doing business, 1.5 hour long interviews. We are the direct contact with the customer. Obviously, we also have a call center and our concierge team that do a phenomenal job, but they kind of only hear about complaints. They get, somebody calls up, my box was wrong. But by utilizing social media, we were able to really listen to them. Hey, without anything specific being wrong, what can we do better? And so eventually it got to a point where we kind of grew within the company. And now, they've let me take the reins on several large projects that 5 years ago, they wouldn't even probably let me in a meeting about. A lot of that has to do with me too. Maturing does definitely help. I was a rowdy 25-year-old coming in here wanting, I know what's going on, but that's not exactly how you can act in a corporate environment. So it took me years to kind of learn how to navigate those waters, learn how to communicate what I wanted to do and how I wanted to help. And then our current management team is just absolutely phenomenal. I've never worked for better people. They listen, they try new ideas. And that's really what it takes because, cigar company, sometimes you can kind of be stuck in the past, but the retail world for everything, cigars to alcohol to, shoes, whatever, it's evolving so fast that you cannot be reliant on yesterday's techniques today at all. You have to be willing to change on a dime, even if it sounds crazy. It's a wacky idea. Everything was wacky at some point. You know what I mean? So being able to listen and to evolve is really important. And they've done that. I'm not saying I know everything, very far from it. But I had my ear to the ground enough, as did a lot of my team. And now we've, kind of become much bigger parts of the conversation, which I'm very, very grateful for. There's not a lot of companies that would have taken a risk on a 23-year-old with a diamond earring and a crappy beard, but they did. And I think it's paying off for both of us.
Speaking of that constant change and evolution, Nick, over the time span that you have been with JR Cigars, the whole social media landscape changed dramatically, and it also changed the cigar industry quite significantly. Which platforms ultimately do you think are the most relevant for the, let's face it, rather small niche that is the premium cigar industry, if you look at it from a global perspective? And why do you think that certain platforms have prevailed where others were less successful in doing that?
Well, as it stands today, I think it really depends on what your goal is. I think if your goal is to get out information, I think YouTube, even with their restrictions that they put on, if you play by their rules, which, I don't know if many of you know, our YouTube channel got taken down last year. We had to rebuild it from scratch. But if you play by YouTube's rules and don't ruffle their feathers too much, in terms of getting out information, that's probably the best way. If you want to engage and discuss any kind of promotions, for, let's say, for retailers or some kind of event that you're having, half off Monte Cristo or some Havana night, Facebook is definitely a way to go. I think that the demographic of customers that really look for a lot of value and look for a lot of deals, they're primarily a Facebook crowd. Everything else, I think, is Instagram, even though I know a lot of us have taken a hit on Instagram in terms of the algorithm changing and our numbers going down. It's still, I think, the most viable source for interesting overall content between, you have your influencers, who some of them I'm a fan of, some of them I'm not, but they exist, and some of them are great. Some of them are informative. But the visual aspect of Instagram is what's important. You can't take a manufactured post that would work on Facebook and put it on Instagram. It's got to have some level of authenticity to it. Whether it's a short Instagram reel you filmed on your phone or a quick little picture you snapped, you can edit it up a little bit, but those kind of manufactured, either promotional signs or deal images that work on Facebook don't on Instagram. And you're going to have the most engagement as well. That's where we've always found our biggest route of engagement in terms of likes, in terms of comments, in terms of shares. It's even when our Instagram was insignificant compared to our Facebook, the engagement we saw on Insta was far beyond what we ever saw on our Facebook page. And recently we've been getting into TikTok a little bit. I'm not the biggest personal fan of TikTok as a concept, but like I said, everything was weird at some point, and you've got to keep evolving with it. Our videographer, Chris, some of you might know him as Secret Chris, my co-host on the podcast, has done a really good job of taking charge of what we do on TikTok and kind of trying new things out. And we're growing there as well. Twitter, at least from what I've seen, it just didn't work because cigars are such a visual medium. It's like an item, it's not the news. The news is in the ether. It's words, it's discussions. It's this event happened at this place. Cigars, it deals with your senses. It deals with sight, sound, smell. And so to just have a Twitter post, new cigar coming, and then, kind of have a picture on there. I mean, at least when I was trying to be active on Twitter, it was never the best route. But I would definitely think, Instagram overall, YouTube for information, and then Facebook for any kind of promotional material.
With that looming threat of overregulation and some of the social platforms banning or terminating all the tobacco content, do you see a need for independently hosted platforms? I know a lot of people got into Discord, where in rather closed communities, they've built quite a substantial network. Others try to venture into hosting their completely own thing, be it for video or any other form of content. How do you see that? And if that were to be the future, how do you think it will pan out? Will people spread themselves more thinly, or at some point, it'll all be consolidated at two that are the most successful?
I think it always comes back around. I think it's very important for people to branch out. I mean, I am no fan of kind of giant tech companies. I'm not going to put on my tinfoil hat here, but we don't need giant companies that kind of corner the market on something and then start out of nowhere start dictating what you can or cannot do. I understand that, YouTube, Instagram, these are private companies, and if they want to, not show a lot of tobacco, I get it. You have the kind of right to do that. But I don't agree with their methods. And I don't agree that what we're doing for the cigar community is anywhere close to what a lot of other industries do. I mean, personally, I am a advocate of the Second Amendment, but if you're going to talk about somebody doing rifle reviews compared to a cigar review, which one of these do you think is crazier to have on your platform? I think they should both be allowed, but the fact that they've spent the last year coming after us, I think is a little overreach, and they have stopped to a degree. The amount of warnings we've gotten on our social media platforms has decreased, and I think it's because if you play by their rules a little bit, they give you a little bit of leeway. But I think branching out onto Discord, or if someone does Twitch streaming, whatever you can to get your message out there. In terms of it kind of, spreading out and then consolidating again, I think that's just the ebbs and flows of any industry. I think you can see it with the streaming wars that we're in right now. Everything was on cable, and then you had Netflix, and then you had Hulu and HBO Max, and it kind of spreads out. And eventually somebody's going to make a service that has all of them all over again. And it's going to come back into kind of, 2 or 3 options. And I think that's just kind of the way of the world. I do know that the FDA is pushing pretty hard right now for something, but I think the fact that they keep failing, I think eventually people are going to see premium cigars for what they are, which is separate from cigarettes. It's separate from all these bad categories that they kind of put together. So I think eventually there's going to, and the cigar industry is growing, not insanely, but our numbers, now are bigger than they were even 10 years ago, because it's evolving. It's the people who are attracted to it are evolving. The industry itself is evolving. And so I think that's all going to come into play. And I think eventually they will see the premium cigar industry for what it is, and God willing, kind of back off a little bit. Until now, like I said, get your message out any way you can.
What do you think the cigar media landscape could do better? What could we all do better in order to strengthen people's awareness, the information that is out there, and to foster the culture even further?
I think the cigar media is doing a very good job right now. I'm like I said, I read Cigar Journal. I'm on Half Wheel every day. Blind Man's Puff. I will say it does seem, in terms of specific news, Half Wheel is kind of in their own category, in that they will have like the slightest update on any story will be on Half Wheel, like, first, and then sometimes other people pick it up, sometimes they don't. Now, the flip side of that coin is that Half Wheel can kind of generate a little too much power, and I think Cigar Aficionado has that issue also, where they become these great sources of information, but because they're so far ahead of the rest, people start taking what they say as gospel. And I think when it comes to cigar reviews, that can sting a little bit. So I would like to see a step up from some of like the next tier media, just in terms of, I wouldn't even know, putting more content out, really, really getting into what the consumers are caring about. I love the Dojo Show. We're a sponsor of Cigar Dojo. I love Cigar Coop, Blind Man's Puff, the Developing Palate. I would love to see these guys take the next step and challenge Aficionado and Half Wheel in a good way, just to create more competition and more information, and also some more crossover with the media. I know Dojo does a good job of having me on. They'll have on Cigar Coop. I think you've talked with the Dojo guys before, so I think they do a good job of it. But even some roundtable discussions with the kind of media landscape, whether it be podcasters, interviewers, writers, kind of getting, I feel like the cigar press, if you will, is kind of scattered. To see it more as an organization and a camaraderie within that, I think would be beneficial for everybody. I've talked with all these guys at some point about something, but to kind of have a little more of a relationship with each other, I think would be great. It's great for the flow of information, and I think it's just great for the industry.
I couldn't agree more, and that's part of the reason why we also try to host regular expert panels, bring other people of the cigar media on, because at the end of the day, we're a small industry anyways, one that is heavily contested, even more so. So we all have to stick together, help and support each other, and I think the more the merrier, because like with the cigar brand, people will gravitate more towards one media platform or the other,
Right.
and there's something for everybody. But it's that competition, quote unquote, in the
Right.
best sense, just the choice and the variety that helps the entire industry. And so I think you have an excellent point there. Absolutely.
Yeah. The only other thing, not to cut you off, that I'm going to be in the minority on this. I know it. Doing away with bad cigar reviews. And what I mean by that is no good comes from a bad cigar review. So if I'm a review website, if I'm a Half Wheel or a Dojo, and I smoke something and I put, oh, this was terrible, I give it a 78. There's no good to be done there. Instead, I would only, if you get something, you smoke it, you don't like it, just don't post about it. That's what we do, or for me and Secret Chris and our content team, is we have our top 5 videos that we do every week, and we have our top 25 at the end of the year. We never want to, denigrate any brand or, show that we don't like something, but it's like, we're not going to talk about what we don't like, but here's specifically what we do like, or what we think is good. And there's been plenty of times where I've seen cigars that were really great get a bad review for, the retailer that the company bought them from didn't keep it humidified, and so it smoked wonky, or they got damaged in shipping, or they were too fresh. And it could kill a brand barely as it's out the door. So I would say give the manufacturers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. And I don't like seeing 78s. It's like, listen, if you didn't like it, just don't put it on your page. And that way you're not giving it any publicity. So if you really think it's bad, you're not helping it at all, but you're also not going to kill it just because you might have specifically not liked that cigar. So that's a private crusade that I'm on. I know a majority of the industry probably doesn't agree, but that's my personal feeling about it.
Why do you think we don't see more editorial content where people truly take a deep dive and present in-depth information, behind the scenes knowledge about the tobacco, what's happening at the factories? I know some people try to do it either through interview format or with videos, but that's something that I rarely see in the media landscape in general. Yes, there's plenty of cigar reviews. You can find the same press releases published on pretty much every single media platform that's out there in the cigar landscape. But I rarely see those kind of long format, deep dive editorial posts where you can get a lot of beef on the bone. Or do you just feel like the audience is not interested or not there for that type of content?
Oh, I think the audience is there. We're trying to bring that back a little bit. We've rejuvenated our cigar magazine that used to be really popular, and it was popular just for that reason. The founder of JR Cigar, Lou Rothman, used to have these quirky and really, behind the scenes, because he was the king of the industry for so many years. He had met everyone. He had also had altercations with everybody at some point, but he would tell these deep, 10-page stories with this guy and that guy and how this brand really came to be. And people were fascinated by it. Now, it's a more politically correct world today. So we have to be more careful. And I also think the shortness of content has become much more popular. People like these kind of like little quick hit pieces. But I don't know. I would love to see more long form content, deep dive editorials. I mean, listen, I don't know really that much about it, but just as an example, the whole Luciano versus Crown Heads thing this year, there's a story there. I don't know what it is. Being that we're a retailer, my bosses aren't going to let me go and dive into that because that's not really our business. But in terms of from a media landscape, there's something there. And I'm not trying to talk about gossip, but there's some storyline going on here that I would I would have liked to have seen explored. I would like some media member to have gone and done a Woodward and Bernstein, if you will, somebody to go in there and really investigate what happened. Or if you want to keep it just happier content, listen, we get when people go down for the Dominican festival, the Nicaraguan festival, and they do their little, today we visited AJ's factory. Why is there not a 5-part video series on AJ's process? The guy has 2 factories. He produces God knows how many top tier cigars. He's a fascinating individual. He's the king of the industry right now. Why is nobody going and talking with this guy at that length? We try to do that as best we can. We have our limited resources. At the end of the day, my job is to inform people, but also to get them to shop with us. So I understand that. But for media outlets, I don't know if it's the lack of funds, because a lot of these guys, this is kind of their part-time gig, which I very much understand. But yeah, go into a field, go to Perdomo's factory, go take a tour, do a 10-part series on these guys, really dive into it. I love the nitty-gritty. I love no one goes to Ecuador. Almost so many of our rappers now come out of Ecuador, between Ecuador, Connecticut, which is on almost everything. Habano, Ecuadorian Corojo has become popular. Sumatra. I don't think I've ever read a piece or seen a picture from a growing field in Ecuador. All I know is that it's cloudy, because that's what they tell us. They say, oh, it's cloudy. It makes it good for the wrapper. Where's the information on it? So that's something I would very much like to see.
I'm glad we share this perspective, and Cigar Journal certainly does a great job in putting forth editorial content as a true cigar magazine. There's still a ton of like old cigar aficionado articles that you can somehow dig up on the internet from the archives. It's fascinating to read some of those very old stories.
Yeah.
I mean, even that one kind of documentary article about going to Cameroon way back in I think it was in the early 90s. Those are real treasures and gems now. And I would love to see more of that in the modern cigar media landscape, and with all the amazing people that you mentioned. I agree. Probably it's a matter of resources that you can throw at it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you guys, Cigar Journal, and Aficionado to an extent, I think still has that last little bit of that kind of journalistic side to it. And that's not to denigrate the other cigar media members, but the other cigar media has kind of come up in this new wave of media where it's different. What people are looking for, it's different. It's very quick hit. It's very video. It's very, oh, look at this crazy thing really quick. But I think people still have the patience and the interest for some of the pieces you guys do, for some of those old aficionado pieces. Some of my favorite Half Wheel articles are not the cigar reviews or the press releases. It's when something major happens, like with the FDA, and Charlie just goes on a rant for, 3,000 words. So I love reading those. When I remember after the 2019 PCA show, and he had his opinion on what happened. It was like my 15 points. I love that kind of stuff. So it does exist out there. I never want to say that people aren't doing it, but doing more of it, I think would be beneficial. Now, there's also, you got to remember, you can't upset the apple cart. If you rely on, and it's true, it sucks, but it's the way of the world. When you rely on manufacturers or organizations, to keep your channel alive, it's hard to go after them, even if it's the truth, even if it's, an expose or something. You like I said, you don't want to hurt anyone else's livelihood. So I think that's a reason. I think, resources is one, but also risks, which I fully understand. There's certain risks I can't take. But I love to see it when it happens, when someone really digs deep on a topic. I really love to get into it.
And again, I think we both absolutely share this, and we can only give credit to so many of the great people out there. whether it's Coop, whether it's Dojo, whether it's the guys at Half Wheel, of course, without a doubt, but so many others like Aaron Loomis, Matt was joining us earlier from How About That Cigar. So there's plenty of platforms out there,
Yeah.
and kudos to all of you guys. You're very important. You're doing a great job, and we greatly respect it and treasure it.
The cigar media is absolutely and very, very important. I look at all of them constantly to just get a, keep your finger on the pulse of the industry. And trust me, there's a lot of guys out there, who have a media show, like, either a podcast or whatever, who I listen to them and I'm like, I might not have heard of this guy, but he knows way more than I do. Like the knowledge out there is fantastic, and the competition is good. Like the more media, the better. Let's get this going. I'm on board for all of it.
Nick, we had a very interesting question from Steve Newman, who posted this in the comments over on Facebook. He was curious about the future of data in decision making in the cigar industry, and how much do you personally leverage data?
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And it's data from everything. I mean, SEO is very important. When you're an e-commerce site like JR is, Google plays a big part in decisions that you make in terms of how you describe your product, how your layout is, how you advertise your product. Because at the end of the day, you want, when somebody types in cigars on Google, you want to be at the top or as close to the top as possible. How do you do that? Through Google. And how do you do it through Google? You have to look at analytics. You have to see customer behavior. You have to see Google behavior. And me, I was a simple cigar guy. I would kind of relied on my instinct and like kind of thinking what people like. Now, a majority of my job is data driven. I look at trends. I look at behaviors, patterns. When did this sell so much and why? If I see that we had one day we had a big sales day for, Mother Church, for example, one of our privates from Crown Heads, I examined that day from 10 different angles. Did we run any promotions? Did we post anything on social media? Why was that the day that so many people bought a thing? And I think the reason that is, I don't want to say people are relying on it too much. I think people would have always relied on this kind of data if it was available. I wasn't around in the 1960s. You had Don Draper and the Mad Men and their martinis kind of guessing what people, people probably like this. And sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong. But their data was a year later, their client would come and tell them, we sold a lot of those shoes because of that ad we put up in Times Square. You don't need to rely on that anymore. I mean, we can see how many times an email was clicked on. We can see which emails get the most clicks. We can see, obviously through social media, all of them have analytics. And diving into this only makes it better for you, and it makes it a better experience for your consumer, because now we can tailor make our I don't want to say attack plan, but tailor make our approach for different consumers. So if you like a certain thing, we can target you only with that certain thing. You don't need to get the 30 other emails about brands you have never bought or don't care about. We can make sure you're only seeing the things that you care about. So it makes it easier for you. It makes it better for us, and everybody wins.
Something, Nick, that I was very curious about, and I thought about it earlier when you mentioned Lou Rothman. JR has such an incredible history behind it, and you represent a very young and dynamic contemporary approach to the cigar industry and communicating it. How important do you feel the legacy and the history aspect of JR is or could be in the way that you also frame your content, the way you present, the way you communicate?
It's very important. I go with the old adage, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So I think looking back is incredibly, I can't stand anytime I'm listening to the news or anything nowadays and people don't understand any kind of historical context. And it could be something as large as, Russia and Ukraine, or it could be something as small as, a cigar launch. But seeing the history of something, understanding how we got to where we are is so important in determining where you can go and why. JR has a really unique history. We were the first kind of big catalog. We were kind of the first on the, one of the first on the internet. For those of you who don't know, Steve Saka was our president for a while and really got JR involved in the forums back when they, weren't as popular, but he was one of the kind of pioneers of that area of the business. Now, it's important not to get stuck in the past. For a long time, JR has been known as fast, fresh, and cheap. And just budget brands. Oh, if they sell it for $10, we're going to sell it for $9. And we've worked really hard the past few years to get out of that, to kind of shed that reputation. But we still have a legacy of 50 years in this industry, 50 years of being one of the leaders in this industry, consistent customer experiences. We're just looking for that next chapter. So we still love the original chapters. We still love the first books, but we want to continue that series. Like any great company wants to. So it's important to see where we came from. It's important to understand Lou Rothman, his mindset, what he was looking at the time, how he was doing business at the time, and then evolve from that. But you can also look at some of his mistakes, but also some of his successes and see how can we do that better. We have a very, very good relationship now with all of our manufacturing partners. There was a time where we didn't need to. Now it's just better for everybody to have a very good, relationship with the manufacturers. We don't rely so much on price. We're still the best priced in the industry for any kind of national brand release. No one's going to have it cheaper or they're doing something shady. But we focus more on quality and experience, which I think is important. We want to provide our customers with the best possible experience and the highest quality product, whether that be somebody else's product or a private label that has our name on it. We want you leaving here feeling good. And that was always the kind of mantra of JR. It's just the tools that we've utilized to go about that have changed. In the 90s under Lou, it was make everything as cheap as possible. Now it's provide people with a better experience and a better quality product. So the past is very important, but so is looking into the future.
Great point. Brian, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening. I was curious, just on this question when you were talking about content can be, the technology is such now that you can really cater it to each individual person. And it has this thing that came to my mind, which is about cigars, but kind of about everything, where people get freaked out. I was on a website or I was on a game or I was Googling or I was on Amazon. And then whatever it was that I was doing on the internet appears suddenly everywhere else I'm on the internet. And like, oh my God, Google knows what Big Brother's watching. And they get upset about this, I guess, in terms of privacy. I mean, I don't have anything to hide. I don't care if the government or Amazon knows where I live or what I buy. I don't have anything to hide. But also my point of view is, see if you agree, if I have to see ads anyway, it might as well be stuff I like.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I do understand people who get freaked out that they were, talking about watches with their buddy in the kitchen and then they pull up their phone and then there's watches on there. So I would say be careful in that aspect. But at the end of the day, the only way these companies make money is if you continue to shop with them. And you're only going to continue to shop with them if they have what you want at the price that you want. So even if they use weird tactics like, oh, the ad pops up on your Instagram, if you don't like the item or you can find it better elsewhere or it's of a bad quality, you're not going to buy it from them anyway. So at the end of the day, any company that's kind of using these tactics or any social media platform that uses these ads, in a weird way, at the end of the rainbow, there needs to be a good product and there needs to be a good experience. Is getting there very different than it was a couple of years ago? Absolutely. But if you're going to make my life a little bit easier, sure. Plus, my brother works in cybersecurity, so he always checks my phones and my laptops to make sure we're all good. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's the future. It's how things are done now. It's how any retail industry has evolved. It's always going to seem weird at first. The AI stuff, I think we can leave behind. I don't know. We don't need to get into any of that. I don't know why people are making AI stuff. I think we're better off without it. But in terms of something like this, if you're talking about Cohiba cigars with your buddy, and then you go on a website and it has those kind of side ads for a Cohiba cigar, is it freaky? Yeah. Can it make your life easier sometimes, or make your retail experience a little quicker? Yeah. So I think there's a give and a take with it. You just got to be careful. That's all.
Yeah. I don't mind ads catered to me. I don't have to worry about what I say in the kitchen either, though, because we don't have the Alexa device. Actually, that's the one that
Smart.
My wife, she won't let us have it. She's kind of freaked out about that.
I don't use Alexa or Siri. I'm not talking to anyone that's not a human. I refuse to do it. When I call up my insurance company, I hit 0 until someone speaks to me. I can't stand talking to robots. Can't stand it.
Thanks. Cheers.
Cheers.
Speaking of Nick, did you see the show? I think Matt, Ty, and Garrett, they were very quick on this. They did a show talking to Chat GPT in the very early days of that whole Chat GPT craze that soon thereafter conquered the world, and now it's everywhere. Now I get from your comment that you're not a big fan of that, but
no.
do you see that has any potential to shift things in the industry, or is it just like a fad where everybody be like, okay, well, let's sit down, talk to each other in person, and have a cigar, because analog is luxury?
My worry is that it's not a fad. That's my fear. Listen, again, I'm not any kind of conspiracy theorist, tinfoil hat guy. I usually don't really care about anything but my cigar and a good TV show. But this stuff really freaks me out. I've seen far too many movies that no good comes of this. Especially the kids doing it to get their homework done now. At the end of the day, what makes humans special is, and makes a human experience special is your senses and how that kind of translates into your mind. It's not manufactured. It's authentic. You taste a cigar, your mind tells you that you like it. You go and buy more. You can tell through its aroma, through its feeling. Anything with this AI where you're just like, oh yeah, hey, write me a script about a movie with Joe Rogan and Charlie Sheen, and then it just kind of, makes this movie that might be successful. It might work. That's the thing is it kind of takes all these things into account where it's analytical enough where it might actually work or it might actually make sense. But at the end of the day, when you take the humanity out of it, what's the point? So is it going to affect the cigar industry? I'm sure at some point. I'm sure there's some manufacturer out there right now who's coming up with a new cigar line and puts a bunch of this stuff into one of those AI kind of creative generators and like, oh, what can my new cigar line look like? And sometimes it's cool. I've seen people who say, put something on Instagram, oh, here's what Star Wars Nike shoe collection would look like. I'm like, that looks dope. But for anything like this, without the humanity, to me, it's pointless. Because to me, it's like whatever feeling I'm having, whether I like this product or I don't like this product, it's manufactured. Some computer manufactured my emotion, my emotional reaction to it, and I don't like that. I want my emotional reaction to be on somebody took the time and created a thing. This was from their mind, their creative mind. They developed it. They worked hard at it. And whether it's good or bad, it came from them. And that's what you appreciate about a lot of products, particularly cigars. I mean, if there was some factory that was completely automated and they were just pumping out cigars that were pretty good, I would take a hand-rolled one that's not as good over it because it took something to make it. It took there's a story there. There's hardship or there's joy or there's whatever it took to create that item. It took an expertise. It took somebody who's rolled cigars for 30 years. It took a farmer who's been doing this for 3 generations. It took something to make it. And if there's no effort, if there's no something in it, then to me, there's no point.
I feel that the cigar industry in particular is sort of a stronghold for that. And this one of those very few products left where you get mesmerized and fascinated by that truly handcrafted thing that is so pure and old school and out of time analog
Yeah.
with everything that comes with it. That, yeah, I think whoever loves a great cigar has a particular appreciation for great experiences and analog experiences with people around them, and something that you can touch, smell, taste,
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
and
And I,
grasp
and I,
with all
th-
your
I
senses.
think members of this community, men and women, I think they share that across so many avenues of their life. I
Mm.
guarantee cigar smokers, they'll take, a 67 manual Mustang over the newest whatever that has what's it called? What's the side? I can't remember. I'm not a big car guy. The side clutch system or some automatic, fancy looking thing. There's something about the tactileness of shifting a car. And even if, even if you get it, if you get the clutch stuck or whatever, there's something about it. It was man-made, like you said, analog. Same thing with watches. I guarantee people in the 70s and 80s probably thought, oh, everyone's just going to be digital watches. And you see that with these Apple watches. How many times do you see a sophisticated gentleman or woman who's a cigar smoker with an Apple Watch? You generally see them with something that ticks. At the end of the day, I'll take something that ticks over something that doesn't. It's just, like I said, there's that appreciation for the handcraftedness, the ingenuity, the time. Anything good should take time. That's
Amen to
kind of
that.
my perspective.
Amen to that, Nick. Let's use that as the segue into our kind of final segment or final question for today. And please go on a little bit of a journey with me here, and let's take a look into the crystal ball together. Besides ChatGPT, what are some of the things that you see on the horizon for the premium cigar industry, both on the manufacturing side that you are also heavily involved with now with private labels and stuff for the 50th anniversary and beyond, but also on a retail level? We spoke about creating experiences. I think that what Abe Dababneh has done for the last couple of years with those tremendous events is just incredible, and could serve as a great role model for many other people in the industry. But what are some things that you get excited about that you think should, see a greater platform or a wider audience? And what are some of the things that you see on the horizon for the next years ahead?
So you brought up a great example with Abe. I've met Abe a few times. I was on the Dojo show with him a couple of months ago. Abe, in terms of how to run your retail operation for both brick and mortar and online, Abe is if I was given the keys to a retail kingdom, that's exactly how I would run it. So Abe is a great example of still having the appreciation for the tradition and kind of having those old school ways, but being able to adapt on a dime, because that's what you have to do in any industries. You have to be able to adapt quickly. A lot of retailers didn't adapt well to COVID. Abe did. Some of them, like obviously the e-commerce sites, us and CI and some of them did very well. Everyone was at home. They were at home longer. They weren't allowed to go anywhere. So during COVID, we were able to kind of utilize that. I don't want to say utilize because that makes it sound like we were taking advantage of a bad situation, but we a lot of online businesses for any industry happen to do well. Amazon, record profits during COVID. Mom and pop shops, brick and mortars, not so much. Abe was able to think on his feet and quickly change his strategy, build up an e-commerce business, get people involved virtually. And now not only is he as big as before COVID, he's even bigger. These events have gotten even more popular. People have been talking about his event for months and months and months. And I think that's what you have to do is you have to be able to adapt quickly. What I see for the cigar industry as a whole, I mean, it's tough to say. I don't want to say we're in a boom, but because the boom had a lot of negative aspects to it. Anyone who was smoking in the 90s, I think, can verify that. You just saw this quick uptick in demand, and then within a couple of years, supply well outgrew demand, and then you were left with what is known as a bunch of Don nobodies that eventually Lou Rothman bought them all up and sold them for, pennies on the dollar. And we don't want to get back to that. I do not want this to be an industry. I don't think anyone wants it for someone to come in and make a quick buck. The past few years, I'm not trying to start any kind of beefs here, but there are some people who have come into this industry to make a quick dollar without any of the respect for the heritage. And now listen, you don't have to come from some giant family legacy of, oh, my grandfather's grandfather was born in Cuba and worked on the fields. You don't need to do that. I mean, John Huber is one of my favorite people in the industry, and he's from San Francisco. Try to find me somebody smarter about blending than a Nick Melillo or a Dion. And Dion runs a shop in Vegas, and Nick's an Italian from Connecticut. You know what I mean? So you don't need to have the great heritage. You need to have the appreciation. This should not be somebody's side gig. Now, if you're, let's say, a media member or a cigar reviewer or something like that, then yeah, of course you need to be able to provide for yourself. And so if you have other jobs, but if you're looking to be a manufacturer and really trying to lead the way, this shouldn't be just something in your portfolio of nonsense for you to make a dollar. And we're starting to see that again, not so much from a manufacturing side, but in other avenues. And that worries me, because once something gets big enough where the shady characters, see a quick opportunity, that's when the market can get inflated. You have too much of a good thing going on. The demand kind of slows down and you're left with a surplus of supply. And then those shady guys are the first ones out, and you're kind of left to pick up the pieces. I mean, how many guys in the 90s were just throwing anything that looked like tobacco together, wrapping it in a band and selling it to a retail store? And then guess what? They made their money and they're all left. And all these retail stores were stuck with garbage product that it took them years to sell. So we have to be wary of that. We want to be a welcoming industry. We want to let new people in, whether it be, like I said, media members, manufacturers, but we want to be wary of people who are just trying to make the fast dollar. We want people who are dedicated. And there's a lot of new ones. I mean, I think, Roma Craft would be considered, a newer manufacturer. Crown Heads would be considered a newer manufacturer. Warped. But these guys are all in. They're smart. They have a respect for the industry, respect for those who came before. And I think that's the key. As long as we maintain that, I think the industry is going to be fine. I do think we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown. I think the supply issues we encountered during COVID are going to kind of come to an end, and we're going to see store shelves fill up. And I think we're actually going to see a little bit of an excess in supply, which may lead to, some nice deals out there on some of the cigars. But I think we had enough years of pretty stable growth overall as an industry that I think we're fine. We didn't have some quick rise out of nowhere. All of a sudden, everybody's smoking cigars. It kind of happened naturally, just through people wanting new experiences and the amount of brands we have out there now, and kind of having an option for everyone. So I think that's the direction we're going to go. I think you're going to, as the FDA comes on a little heavier, some of those outlying companies might not make the cut, but I think the names that now, obviously the Generals and the Altiduses and the Olivas and the Plasencias, but even the smaller ones, the Black Label trading companies, the HVCs, the Warps, the Aladinos. I think we have a very, very solid industry right now from a manufacturing side. I think they all work together, and they all have very similar goals. And so I think we're going to be okay. I think in the long run, I think the industry is going strong, and I'm excited for what happens next. Do I know how the industry is going to evolve in terms of marketing or in terms of the next trend? No, because so many things take me by surprise. I don't have that crystal ball for that specifically. But I do think, kind of what goes up must come down. So I do think we're going to see a return to core level products and to building an established brand that people can rely on day in and day out. And I think it's going to be a little less reliant on the quick hit, money maker, limited edition, crazy run. I think within the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to see less of that because it's not sustainable for the manufacturer. At the end of the day, it's what customers might think that they want, but it's really not what they want.
Excellent points. Kind of a great summary and putting things into perspective, Nick. Many thanks for that. I have one final question, and let's change the crystal ball for a magic wand. If you could wish for one thing that you would love to accomplish within the next couple of years, a project that you have in mind, or a crazy idea, something that you would love to see in the industry, what would that be?
I'm just going to put my wish out there. And I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of great manufacturers on projects. Some that we're currently doing, some that we did, just to mention a few: Alec and Bradley, Chan, Huber, Nick Melillo, Steve Saka, Aganorsa, all these guys, Michael Herklotz, love getting to work with him. But I mean, listen, regardless how the industry has changed, regardless of what the current trend is, Carlito Fuente is the guy. He will always be the guy. You can have all these different directors nowadays, and they're doing phenomenal work, whether it be on streaming or in the theaters. But like, Tarantino's Tarantino, Scorsese is Scorsese. Even if they haven't put out something recently, like, that's the guy. If I could work on a project with Carlito Fuente, that's the goal. That's the goal. I think that's the goal for any retailer. And I think a lot of manufacturers, that's the goal. You strive to be a Fuente because they're huge. They're one of the biggest companies, but they still treat themselves as a boutique company in a lot of ways. They try not to overproduce. They try to keep their runs as limited as possible to maintain quality. They have style, they have class. I actually get mad at them a lot. That's probably the company I rail against the most because I want them to release something new that's not one of these, crazy opus because I love their product so much. I would love to see another Hemingway or another Don Carlos, another mainstay cigar from them because Fuente was my first true love. And I think as a lot of people in this industry was that first very upper echelon experience that you get. And I think they were one of the first ones for the American cigar industry in the 80s and 90s, as they said, hey, this could be a classy, elevated thing. So yeah, that's always going to be, at the end of the rainbow, I get to make some kind of Opus X with a JR name on it. Very unlikely, but something around that. I think that's the goal.
Very cool. Nick Libretti, it's been a tremendous pleasure and joy to have you at the Light 'em Up Lounge. Many thanks for everything that you shared with us. Many thanks for the time you took out of your precious day. I wish you continued success, all the very best, and tremendous cigar moments. I hope that we can share a cigar in person very soon. I don't know if you're going to the show.
I am.
July.
I am. This is my first time going back in a couple of years, so I'll absolutely make sure to hit you up when I'm on my way out there. And I wanted to thank you. This has been awesome. Like I said, so rarely do I get to be interviewed. It is very strange on this side of the desk, but you were phenomenal. I loved your audience. You had some great insight and you asked really good questions. And I get to judge you because I'm usually the question asker, and I'm like, these are really good questions. So this was awesome. Thank you so much for giving me
greatly
the time.
Appreciate it. Many thanks, Nick. And we'll do another one, hopefully very soon. I'd love to get you on one of our expert panels for one of the upcoming discussions that we usually host either once a month or once in a quarter. So we'll definitely catch up there and latest in Vegas as well. So
absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah. Anything you need, you let me know. And thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it.
All the best to you guys. Light them up, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you.